Hi, I'm Dave Epstein. This is Growing Wisdom, and we're going to talk about growing stuff like lettuce outside 12 months of the year. How can you do that? Well, it's pretty obvious during the spring, summer, and even into the fall, right? But the big question is, how do you get stuff like this in the winter? Well, a cold frame is one great way to grow vegetables all winter long. Now, you can't grow things like tomatoes or peppers or eggplants. Those are what we call warm weather crops, and they need really warm weather, so the cold frame's not that warm. But lettuce and other herbs, other greens, do fairly well in a cold frame all winter. So this is some red sales lettuce that I have here. You can see how beautiful this is in late fall into winter. And how did we do this? Well, we have the cold frame. This is my cold frame, and a cold frame is a structure, usually made of wood with greenhouse plastic, that protects things inside of it from the real cold. It also heats up a little bit during the course of the winter. This particular cold frame is actually on the brick patio. You could do exactly what I'm showing you and put the cold frame in your garden, and you'd put the plants right in the soil. We're using the cold frame to keep our containers growing throughout the winter. So let me open this up for you. And what you'll notice in here is a lot of things really growing quite well. So as we talked about, there are certain things which do really well in a cold frame throughout the colder months in the winter. Some of the stuff we have, let me just pull these containers out. So here's a container where I have some cilantro. We've got a couple of lettuce plants, and we also have something called Claytonia. I really like the Claytonia. This is a really interesting plant. Claytonia is a green, and it can be eaten as a salad green. It's really a nice green to have. And all of these really can take that cold weather. And because this is protected from the elements with the greenhouse plastic and with the wood around it, this will continue to grow all winter long. So what are some of the other things you could grow in containers in a cold frame? Well, here's a little container of spinach. Now, we planted this spinach about 4 weeks ago, and you can see it's just beginning to germinate at this point. When I say grow throughout the winter, this is not going to thrive. It's not going to become this beautiful big plant. It's just too cold. There's not enough light. But it will not die. And what will happen is, as we get towards the latter half of January into February, this will get so warm as the sun gets higher and higher up that things will begin to grow months earlier than they would otherwise. So by the time I get to the end of February, we'll be able to start harvesting while everyone else is still shoveling. Another plant or herb that does really well is arugula. And arugula tends to really enjoy the chilly weather. You can see that we planted this arugula, and you can see it's sprouted. And this will continue to grow very slowly. If we get a few warm days during the course of the winter, it may grow a little bit more, but it won't die. You may ask, what do you do when it snows? We actually tend to build the snow up around it because snow is a great insulator. And so these plants really don't need as much light as you might think because they're growing so slowly. So I'll let the snow cover this, and we've had winters where we have a foot of snow on top of the cold frame. One thing you want to be careful of, if the snow gets too heavy, it can crack the cold frame, so don't let too much snow build up, and don't let the snow get too heavy with water. At that point, you may want to very carefully remove some snow from the cold frame. This plant is actually 2 years old. This is fennel, and it's been in here through 2 winters already, and you can see how beautiful it's doing. It really tends to like this cooler weather, and so you could just snip this off and use that in any sort of a dish that calls for fennel. Just love the smell of fennel. It has that great licorice smell. You could make this in cookies or any of your other dishes that call for a little bit of fennel. Now, one of the questions I sometimes get asked is, how do you winter your rosemary over? I actually winter my rosemary in the cold frame. And rosemary, when it gets cold, starts to flower. And look at that. So this is a creeping rosemary, and creeping rosemary is a little hardier than the rosemary which grows upright. The upright rosemary I put in the garage because it's just a little bit milder in there, but the creeping rosemary does really well, and just look how beautiful that is. The flowers are spectacular. So here it is. Again, it's winter and things are flowering. If you live in a milder region, the rosemary may winter over outside. But for those of you that live in a cold region, say in zones 7 or 6 or 5 or colder, you probably want to protect your rosemary throughout the winter. If you look in the back, you see a little bit of purple and green leaves. Those are kales. And kale is one of those vegetables that really does thrive in the colder weather. It gets sweeter, and that will continue to grow well into winter and then start up very early in the spring. If you look in the back, you see these seedlings have just sprouted. This lettuce mix will not grow a lot during the deepest of the winter months, but as that light gets stronger, especially in the latter half of January and well into February, the lettuce will start to grow even faster and we'll be harvesting way before anybody else. So where do you get the cold frame? You may be saying, hey, I like one of those. If you go online, you can certainly Google cold frame and find one. If you're handy, you could build one by getting the parts like the greenhouse plastic and having somebody, or maybe yourself, build one of these. You want to try to experiment. Over the years, I've tried different things in the cold frame. Some things work well, some don't work as well. It's also going to depend on exactly where you live. If you live in a very, very cold location, you may want to take something like a little bit of row cover and put it over all of your plants in addition to the cold frame. That will give an added bit of protection as well. And also, some things may not winter over. Some years I've had little voles get in there or mice or things like that. So not a bad idea to maybe stick a mouse trap in there just in case, because guess what? As much as you like the greens, so do they. Greens in the winter using a cold frame. For Time Warner Cable and Growing Wisdom, I'm Dave Epstein.